I'm Nick Martin, the Assistant National Secretary of the Labor Party, and I just wanted to thank the Search Foundation for putting on today's and yesterday's conference, and also to recognise the Indigenous owners of this land. Look, just in terms of kicking things off, I wanted to tell a bit of a story about myself and why I'm here and where I've come from and why I think this conference actually is important. I've been a member of the Labor Party for more than 15 years now, but before I was a member of the Labor Party, I was active in social movement politics, in progressive left politics, before I actually found my way into the Labor Party. And look, one of the catalytic moments for me in that journey was in 1998, when as a young student union activist, I saw the news breaking about dogs on the waterfront, an entire workforce locked out, essentially for being members of a strong trade union. And that MUA dispute was really important for me in shaping my views about what we needed to do to defeat the Howard government, as it then was, also what we needed to do to remake the Labor Party into a fighting force in electoral politics. And that's why I got involved in the Labor Party at that time. On getting involved in the Labor Party, of course you can't be involved in the Labor Party without being a little bit disappointed with it from time to time. So I got involved in many campaigns to change the Labor Party. One in particular after 2001 was the campaign around Labor for Refugees. I was one of the co-founders of that rank and file party movement to try and change Labor's asylum seeker policy, a campaign which continues to this day. And then moving on from that, I've become a national official of the Labor Party. I am, as you can see, I have a face. Most people who are involved as national officials of the Labor Party are described as faceless men. I'm not one of those guys. But also I was involved after the 2010 election. We had a very important election there with an inconclusive result in lots of ways, but also an important one for the Labor Party, where we conducted a national review about what we needed to do to change organisationally as a Labor Party to make us a better, more democratic, more outward-reaching Labor Party. And I was the author of that review report along with Senator John Faulkner, who many of you know, former Premiers Bob Carr and Steve Bracks. So that's just a little bit of background about me. It informs a lot of why I'm here today and also a bit of what I'm going to say. But look, what I really wanted to talk about today was how we can beat Tony Abbott, why he is beatable, and what we need to do to get moving on that. And look, the first thing I did want to say is Tony Abbott actually is beatable. I get a lot of despair from people inside the Labor Party and the broader left about whether or not this guy can be defeated in 5.5 months' time. But the reality is inside the Liberal Party, they're not as cock-a-hoop as everyone in the broader left seems to be about Abbott's chances. They're aware that this guy is a fundamentally flawed leader. They know that he's got enormous issues around him, and they know that these can be exploited by a large and united political campaign against him. They know, for example, that he is one of the most deeply conservative leaders we've ever seen. Sorry, is that any better? Okay. Okay, how's that? So they know that he is in fact one of the most deeply conservative political leaders in Australian political history. What he is in fact is someone whose values and views are deeply out of step with the Australian public, whether it's on women, whether it's on divorce, whether it's on Indigenous politics. In fact, this guy is fundamentally out of step with where mainstream Australia is. They also know that when it comes down to it, he is a hugely negative politician. You would have seen the Labor Party constantly referring to him as a negative politician. Where is the Liberal Party's positive plan for Australia's future? It's non-existent. They know that they are flimsy on this, and they know that it goes back to a core failing of Abbott's. Look, they also know that he is in fact more neoconservative than many previous leaders, including John Howard. His views on climate change are known to all of us here in this room. His direct action policy, so-called, was cooked up in focus groups to provide a fig leaf over his real views on climate change. Also, they know that his economic views are actually very confronting. Despite the mutterings about his DLP leanings, what we do know from things like the IPA address that Tad referred to is that he is very cosy with the far right. He was a vanguardist on the work choices legislation. He created the ABCC and he's argued against stimulus spending on more than one occasion. And as part of this worldview, he's also a very big believer in small government. As Prime Minister, he'd take the axe to essential services and jobs. He's got $80 billion in unfunded promises. The sort of cuts that he would put through the public sector would be in the order of 50,000 plus job losses, potentially up to maybe 100,000 positions in the public sector. So all of these are very real vulnerabilities for Abbott. They are vulnerabilities that are waiting to be exploited by the left broadly in society. They are waiting for people to construct a critique around him about the values that he holds, about what he would do in government, but also most importantly in some ways, his character and his fitness for high office in this country. Now, people don't often talk about those sorts of things around Tony Abbott, but this guy is surely one of the most erratic politicians in Australia's history. You couldn't sort of watch that footage. I don't know if you saw it on Channel 7 where Mark Riley asked him about his comments in Afghanistan, where all Tony Abbott does is nod. He just nods and nods and nods, and there's a look of menace, there's a look of intimidation on his face, and all he's about is trying to control himself and to stop himself unleashing on Mark Riley, the Channel 7 journalist. This guy is someone who is personally, I think, deserving of much more criticism from the left, and we can clearly construct a case around his fitness for government, his plans and his policies. But also in terms of beating Abbott, and perhaps more importantly, what we do know is that there are opportunities in the current state of play in Australia for us to take advantage of. Now, the global financial crisis has swept across the globe. It has caused massive dislocation, austerity in Europe, and cuts to services in many countries. But also what it's caused is for people to become worried and concerned about their future. There's never been a better time for people to be talking about the role of government, the role of the state, the role of welfare in picking people up than times like this. And yet we have this contrast with where Tony Abbott wants to take Australia. Now, we know from reports like the Ipsos Mori report, and sorry, I'm not going to laud EMC like the other speakers on this panel. I wasn't aware that it was an EMC love fest today. But Ipsos Mori actually did put out a very good report on the mood and mind of the nation. And what they found was that for the first time in Australia's history, insecurity is the dominant mood for people out there. Insecurity about work, insecurity about government services, insecurity, has to be said, about the direction of Australia. So all of this insecurity represents a political opportunity. But also, additionally, we know that life has changed. We know that as a deeply conservative person, Tony Abbott would love to take Australia back 50 years. You know, his views on divorce and women are reflective of that. But we know that modern Australia is a very different place. Women in the workforce, childcare, people caring for older parents, all of these are new challenges that didn't exist 50 years ago. Insecurity of work is a dominant one there. So these sorts of pressures, the question is, does Tony Abbott actually understand modern Australia? I don't think he does, and there's a clear opportunity for us to build an agenda around that. Now, talking for a second more about polling, after the 2010 election, we did a major study as part of the Progressive Australia program, where we looked at the views and attitudes of Australians on key philosophical and political questions. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly to some of us in this room, but it surprised me actually, what we found was solid majorities in a lot of areas for what you would call traditional social democratic politics, around job security, around government intervention in the economy, around public education, public health and support for jobs. There were clear social democratic majorities. And this actually gets me to the point that I want to make. For us to have a fight in this election where we can beat Tony Abbott, and most importantly perhaps where we have a fight in this election which prefigures a much bigger fight over the next 3 to 5 years, we need to have a solid social democratic set of policies as the Labor Party that's supported by a broader left. And that's what we're working up as part of our campaign as the National Labor Party. And I'm pretty confident that we will have good policies in the election that a lot of people can work with. But I did want to make one point there about uniting the left. We know as the Labor Party that we only win when we're able to bring working people, we're able to bring inner city progressive people, we're able to bring people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds into one electoral force. We have to unite very disparate elements into an electoral coalition. We know that's when Labor's successful. You know, the Whitlam government, the Hawke government, all did that, as did Kevin Rudd in 2007. We need to make sure that as part of a broader left, we're not dividing that as well. And look, I've got a lot of respect for my fellow Green speakers on this panel. I think Kate Fairman's a great representative and I look forward to her joining the Australian Senate. And I really enjoyed Hall Greenland's book on Niagara Glass. But I did want to make this one point about the Greens and political organisation. Here in New South Wales, we've seen dramatic changes to the electoral legislation here around campaign finance and donations. What we've seen is a vote in the upper house of New South Wales Parliament where the Liberals and Greens voted to change the laws around trade union participation in electoral politics. It did two things. It stopped trade unions' ability to make donations to the Labor Party to help a progressive party beat Conservatives in this state. And secondly, it stopped unions in this state ever running a Your Rights at Work style campaign in New South Wales ever again. Now, that sort of politics, if we're talking about building a broader left and a united left, that sort of politics has got to stop. We've got to make sure that we're able to actually unite people on a progressive agenda, and part of that is organisational. We can't afford to have those sorts of politics dividing the movement. So, just in conclusion, for us to beat Abbott, we've got to have a social democratic agenda that's supported by a broader left. Thanks very much.